Namaskar, this is Newsnight on DD India. The emerging situation in Afghanistan is a matter of concern. We continue to focus on developments there as reports come in of the Taliban making more ground in its endeavor to take power by force. My name is Mark Lynn. Let's begin with the headlines. The situation in Afghanistan worsens. Talks in Doha continue with India participating. India calls for ceasefire in Afghanistan, says gains made in the last several years, like women and minority rights, should be safeguarded. Afghanistan's foreign minister calls on UN to work with Pakistan to dismantle the sanctuaries and supply lines that support the Taliban. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Taliban won't return to negotiation table for a political settlement as long as Ashraf Ghani remains the president. Death toll in Kinnaur landslide mounts to 15. 13 have been rescued, 16 remain missing. Extreme climate phenomena continues to ravage the world. Also, wildfires ravaging Italy and Tunisia, flash floods engulfing parts of North Turkey as well as coastal North Korea. The Prime Minister interacts with women's self-help groups in the Atmanirbhar Nari Shakti Se Samvad and lauds the self-help groups of women for their unprecedented services during the corona period. Also releases funds of around 1,625 crore rupees for 4 lakh self-help groups. Milestone of 100 gigawatts of installed renewable energy capacity achieved by India. On the clean energy front, India stands in the 4th position globally in terms of installed renewable energy capacity, 5th in solar, 4th in wind in terms of installed capacity. Speaker Om Birla and the Rajya Sabha Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu meet and review what happened in Parliament. They say appropriate action should be taken. CCTV footage of what happened in the Rajya Sabha leaves the nation shocked. Treasury and opposition benches trade charges. Senior union ministers demand an apology from the opposition for disruptive behavior and forcing an early adjournment. Opposition leaders march from Parliament to Vijay Chowk to protest muffling of their voices. Union Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports Anurag Singh Thakur confers the National Youth Awards of 2017-18, 2018-19 to 22 awardees on International Youth Day and hails India's youth as the drivers of AI or Atmanirbhar innovation. India sends off the largest Paralympic contingent to the Tokyo Paralympic Games in an official ceremony. The Union Culture and Tourism Minister G. Kishan Reddy, the Minister of State for External Affairs Meenakshi Lekhi, President of the Paralympic Committee of India Deepa Malik boost the morale of the Indian para-athletes. Our top story. Reports suggest that the Afghan government negotiators in Qatar, they have offered the Taliban a power-sharing deal. Now efforts are on to bring about a ceasefire. The Taliban captured Ghazni, which is about 130 kilometers from Kabul, and this is the 10th major city, in fact, to fall to the hardline group that intends to return Afghanistan to strict Islamic law. India has been watching the situation and is in touch with stakeholders as negotiations continue to preserve gains made during the last 2 decades. Here's a comprehensive report.
Bent on taking control of Afghanistan by force, the Taliban has captured Ghazni, the 9th provincial capital to have fallen to the hardline Islamist group in a week. Kabul, as pointed out by US intelligence agencies, is just 150 kilometers to the northeast of Ghazni, and they say it could fall within 90 days. The speed of the Taliban advance has brought into debate US President Joe Biden's decision to withdraw US troops and leave the Afghan government to wage a lonely battle when for 2 decades the Afghan troops were propped up coalition and NATO forces led by the US. The Islamists now control 65% of the country. Kabul lies in a valley surrounded by hills. All gateways to Kabul were choked with civilians entering the city to flee the violence from other parts, a situation Taliban insurgents could well exploit to enter Kabul incognito. United Nations, local and international NGOs have stayed on to deliver aid despite the hard times.
A temporary health clinic and a mobile health teams are providing health services to these people. Despite the worsening security situation, humanitarian agencies are staying and delivering to people in need, reaching 7.8 million people in the first 6 months of this year.
Taliban fighters have seized key government buildings in the northeastern city of Kunduz. Government forces are hanging on to the airport. The Taliban also control the northern provincial capital of Sar-e-Pul, driving officials out of the main city to a nearby military base. Observers have wondered as to how the Taliban have mobilized their forces with such wicked speed without any external support. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan has been in touch with the Taliban and even interacted with them in Islamabad earlier this year. He maintains that they want Ashraf Ghani to step down before any meaningful negotiations.
Their condition is that as long as Ashraf Ghani is there, we are not going to talk to the Afghan government.
Afghanistan has called on the UN to work with Pakistan to dismantle the sanctuaries and supply lines that support the Taliban. India is monitoring the situation closely and is in touch with all partners, while at the same time facilitating the safe return of specific minorities that could be the subject of targeted attacks of the Taliban.
This is a situation on the ground. We continue to hope that there will be an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. We are supporting all peace initiatives in Afghanistan. Our primary concern is peace and stability in that country and offering a prosperous future, independent, sovereign, democratic. Our mission in Kabul issued an advisory for Indian nationals earlier this week, advising them to return to India via commercial flights. And our embassy, our mission in Kabul, continues to remain in touch with the Afghan Hindu and Sikh community members, and we will ensure the provision of all necessary assistance to them.
The Taliban's brutal attacks on cities, war crimes, human rights violations, and the emerging humanitarian catastrophe are all part of the conversation in Doha. The Afghan negotiating team, headed by the chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation, Dr. Abdullah, is in discussion with the US, Pakistan, Russia, and China in Doha. The Afghan Foreign Ministry has reiterated that the continuation of the Taliban's bloody attacks and collusion with regional and international terrorists will not only lead to a humanitarian catastrophe and the protraction of war in Afghanistan, but also exacerbate violent extremists and incite terrorists in the region, posing a serious and irreparable threat to the collective security of the region and the world. India is also a part of these talks. India has been involved with the development of Afghanistan based on democratic values and is in conversation through diplomatic channels to preserve the gains made in the last 2 decades.
We are committed to the long-term development of Afghanistan. We would like to see a peaceful, prosperous and democratic Afghanistan, which is, as our minister was saying, both at peace within and peace outside. We want a ceasefire. We want to preserve the gains of the last 2 decades, minorities, particularly related to minorities and women. And we hope that everybody, all stakeholders can find a peace process that takes it forward.
US President Joe Biden continued to urge Afghan leaders to fight for their homeland, showing no regret for his decision to withdraw US troops. The US has spent more than $1 trillion over 20 years and has lost thousands of troops, a cost they no longer wish to bear. Bureau Report, DD India.
So that brings us to In Focus tonight, and we are focusing on this. Afghanistan's civil war gets worse. To discuss this, we have with us G. Parthasarathy, former senior diplomat, former ambassador of India, and Sushant Sareen is senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Ambassador Parthasarathy, let me start with you. How realistic is a negotiated political settlement, even talking about it at this time? Can the Afghan government actually share power with the Taliban?
The question is, will the Taliban share power with Afghan government?
Yes.
The answer is no, for the simple reason that they are going to get a predominant position. Don't forget the numbers. That's the strategy which they have adopted could only have been drawn up by the ISI. Rather than go for major centers, the first thing they did is moved eastwards and then northwards, westwards and then northwards to capture the border towns. That means they sealed off entry to Uzbekistan, to Tajikistan, to Turkmenistan. And these are areas from which even we, before the
Yes.
American intervention, were involved in many ways, especially in Tajikistan. So the strategy was extremely well planned, executed with some precision, recognizing the weaknesses in the Taliban, in the Afghan army. But I think there's still some way to go. Certainly in major areas like Kandahar or Kabul.
Right.
And let's see what happens in Mazar-e-Sharif, because that's the heartland of the others, especially the Tajiks.
Okay.
And the Tajiks constitute about 34% of the population.
All right.
Against 45. If they take Mazar, that would be a serious setback.
All right.
But in any case, this will go on. I'm afraid the Afghan government has not done itself any good.
Okay.
Sacking an army chief in the middle of a battle, especially when the army chief just did not know how to defend the western borders. We're going to be in for that difficult time.
Okay.
But I personally believe that it's not something that's going to be completed tomorrow or tomorrow morning, because the
Right.
opposition is still strong. Kandahar they have not been able to penetrate, though they are on its outskirts. So let's see how the situation plays out.
Okay.
I have no faith in this rubbish about an Afghan Taliban joint government or a coalition.
Okay. Fair enough.
Their values
Yes.
are totally different.
Yes, Mr. Sareen, so I mean, what Ambassador Parthasarathy seems to be saying is that it's likely to be a protracted civil war for some time at least. But some estimates suggest that 90 days Kabul is going to fall. What's your reading of the situation?
It's not often that I agree with Ambassador Parthasarathy, disagree with him, but I agree with him on the first part of what he said, that these negotiations are utterly pointless, and the Taliban are not serious about it. Where I disagree with him is, and I disagree with even the American assessments of 90 days.
Yes.
I would be pleasantly surprised if, at the speed at which things are happening, if the Afghan government manages to last beyond this month, and certainly beyond next month. And I think the Pakistani game plan is that they would want to wrap it up as soon as possible, at least capture all the other big towns. Herat has fallen today.
Yeah.
There are some reports that even Kandahar might have fallen today. Mazar-e-Sharif is important, but it's not that important considering that the Taliban have occupied virtually all of North Afghanistan. Provinces where they had very great difficulty in the 90s to even establish a toehold, they seem to have swept through those. So I think the speed at which events are moving would lead me to believe that it would be, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the month you have the Taliban knocking on the doors of Kabul and perhaps even entering it, if not occupying it. And I think we need to see reality for what it is. We might not like it,
Yes.
But I think that's the reality, and we just simply can't close our eyes to the speed at which things are falling. Just today, the
Yes.
Americans are literally, it's shocking that the American chief negotiator, Khalilzad, Zal, as he likes to call himself, who's made a complete hash of everything, is actually pleading with the Taliban in Doha that, listen, if you guys are occupying Kabul, please don't attack our embassy, spare our embassy so that we don't have to pull out of it.
Okay.
And we'll
Fair
give you
enough.
some money for it. This is a superpower. This is
Indeed,
a power with whom we are thinking of aligning in a possible confrontation with China. And I think what is happening in Afghanistan should be a wake-up call for us. And we need to understand that we have to defend ourselves on our own.
Right.
We have the weapons, we have strategic weapons, and perhaps this kind of diffidence which we have been showing. I think we need to really reevaluate our position, because we are now entering into a very, very, very dangerous time. And we have no partners, we have no friends. We will be in this wars, all the wars, and some of these are going to be forever wars. We will be on our own. The sooner we wake up to that reality, the better it is for us.
Ambassador Parthasarathy, the Afghan government relying on American support or Western powers is just out of the question. But the point is that the Taliban, could they be making a deal with the powers that be, the major powers, by not targeting their interests in Afghanistan or their properties to that extent, as Sushant Sareen was suggesting?
No, I don't think the Taliban are going to cut any deals. And I share, I often disagree with young Sushant, but I share his views on Khalilzad. I think he's messed up the American negotiations. The Americans have put themselves in a pathetic position, pleading, which mercifully we are not doing with the Taliban. But yes, we can disagree on timelines. But the fact is, the Afghan government has put itself in a very difficult position.
Okay.
They have, sacking an army chief in the middle of the battle. I mean, he could have done it before it happened. How's it you didn't know if he's rotten, how rotten he is?
Yes.
Therefore, it's been mishandled. Let us see, because from my reading of Afghanistan and the past, the Taliban is an entirely Pashtun force.
Yes.
It is impossible for any length of time for a Pashtun force, a disorganized one like this, organized only thanks to Pakistani help, to rule that entire country. Don't forget, the Pashtuns are 43 to 45% of the population.
Okay.
So vast areas are outside their control. So yes, we could disagree on the day they will enter Kabul. I feel it may take some more time.
Right.
Let us see what happens in Mazar-e-Sharif, and then we can agree. But yes, the Afghan government, I'm afraid, has not anticipated.
Yes.
It's not kept its soldiers war ready. One of the helicopters we have given, I'm told, with its propellers and other parts removed, is standing by where the Taliban are located at the moment. So it's a poor performance, and one really appreciates the bravery of the Pashtuns. Don't forget, there are people who have invaded our national capital on several occasions historically. So the thing is, we'll have to wait. I'm not.
We just have to wait and watch.
Dogmatic about my dates.
Okay.
Young Sareen is Sushant.
Let's bring in Sushant once again, Mr. Sareen. The point is that India is in touch with the stakeholders and the negotiations that are going on in Doha. But India has, you did mention, we are in for a tough time and we have to defend ourselves. We have to have, what are India's primary concerns? I mean, is it Pakistan and China getting together using the Taliban? To that extent, I mean, could you see India balancing that with Russia, the time-tested friend, coming into the picture, because they seem to be part of some sort of negotiations with the Chinese as well?
No, I don't think so. I think the Russians will be protecting their own interests, and they do see their interests more aligned with the Chinese than they do with us. The Americans have pushed them into the Chinese camp completely. We are maintaining our relationship with the Russians, but if it's a toss-up between us and the Chinese, I think the Russians are far more beholden to the Chinese. We've seen some examples of that. They haven't been really been called to make a choice until now. And in any case, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I am not entirely sure that India and Russia have any degree of convergence, notwithstanding whatever we might be saying in public and whatever coordination we might be doing. But I think our interests are vastly different. Our approaches to what is happening in Afghanistan is vastly different. On the larger challenges, look, Pakistan and China on their own are bad enough. But if they start using, and they will be using the Taliban, at least Pakistan would be using these characters in one form or another, then obviously it muddies our strategic scenario even more. And at a time when even within the rest of the region, we see an expanding Chinese footprint, it's not a very happy situation for us.
Okay.
So we really need to pull up our own socks. We really need to get our economy up and going. We really need to, spend a lot more than what we are doing on beefing up our defenses.
Right.
We need to be modernizing our armed forces. Our armed forces need to be waking up and realizing that they will not be fighting the kind of set piece, Second World War kind of battles which they've been practicing for, but a far more different kind of a battlefield. This has been historically for 5,000 years been one of our biggest problems, that we keep preparing for fighting the last wars rather than the future wars. And I think we need to wake up to some of that. So I think there's a lot of work we need to be doing. And the sooner we get out of the denial mode, the better it is for us.
But Ambassador Parthasarathy, do you see India having a lot of goodwill amongst the people of Afghanistan? After all, there are a lot of development works being built by India, and India has not, in any way shown any antagonism towards the Afghan people to be a force that, should be considered as an enemy state.
Well, I think in all my visits to Afghanistan, I generally make it a point to visit, small stores and shops. And for India, there is a huge amount of goodwill because the aid we have given, whether it is to produce electricity at the capital, whether it is for irrigation in Herat and areas around it, that has earned us a lot. And a lot of their teenagers and others have come and done their studies, a couple of thousand of them. So India has that sort of goodwill. But you are faced with as Ashutosh says, with a very formidable alliance. Coming to the Russians, I don't think the Russians will do anything wantonly against us. Right at the present moment, they are focused on ensuring that the old Central Asian republics like Tajikistan and others, Kyrgyzstan, they are not threatened by the Taliban. That is their primary interest. Their interest, they will continue their good relations with us despite our American connection, because in their heart of hearts, no Russian trusts the Chinese. It is a marriage of convenience. That is what it is, geopolitically. But having lived in Russia this long, I can tell you the depth of feelings is very anti-Chinese. And the fact of the matter is, as far as the Russians are concerned, whatever arms we want, we are getting. And that's the main area, and also some of the energy projects and so on. So yes, you are going to find now, I'm afraid, a China-Pakistan alliance on our western flanks, very closely knit together. That alliance would even extend to Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and on our western shores to countries like Maldives. So the diplomatic challenge really now for India, it's all well to talk of the Quad, but they'll have to put their money where the mouth is, and we have to see a greater amount of money, economic assistance coming into our neighbors and our neighborhood, so that economic development is not compromised.
Right, Mr. Sareen, the world, the international community has not accepted the Taliban. They say that, you know, the recognition of by force is not going to take place. So, I mean, if it does take control and it does get control and it need to be recognized, it will be the neighbors that will have to be recognize them first. It will be Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. How do you see them responding?
Well, look, I think, again, like I said, we need to get out of denial.
Sure.
The Iranians have been dealing with the Taliban. I think the Iranians, if there is no anti-Shia massacres, the Iranians will do business.
Yes.
Eventually, there will be a falling out. But for now, I think the Iranians will recognize the Taliban regime and deal with them, as will the Central Asians. They will all have certain suspicions. They will all have certain reservations. But I think they will err on the side of pragmatism. And I use the words advisedly, err on the side of pragmatism.
Okay.
And try and do business with the Taliban. Whether that will be successful in the long run or not is another matter. So I think the neighboring countries, I don't see the Taliban being isolated like they were last time. I see the neighboring countries all, recognizing the Taliban. And like I just told you, I'm quoting a Western media report. I don't think much of that newspaper, but the rest of the world seems to, which is New York Times. They are reporting that, Zalmay Khalilzad is begging the Taliban that don't attack our embassy and we will give you money, perhaps even recognition. Okay. So, the Americans are also speaking with a bit of a folk tongue because in Washington, they say that we will not recognize you if you take over power through force, you will be a pariah nation. Zalmay Khalilzad is promising them that spare our embassy. If you're not going to recognize them, why do you need your embassy in Kabul? So, the Americans seem to be talking at cross purposes. Perhaps wokeism is also taking over their diplomacy.
Right.
But other than that, the British had earlier announced that, yes, we will be ready to do business with the Taliban. So I think
so the tune is changing, you think?
Which will be open to
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for in this discussion. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Do on ground.
Yeah, thanks very much.
If there are those kind of monstrous things which they do on ground, then it will be difficult for some of these countries to turn their face away. Otherwise, Afghans will die. Who gives a damn?
Yes, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Sushant Sareen and Ambassador G. Parthasarathy. Thank you for your time. Moving on then to our next story. Himachal Pradesh Chief Minister Jairam Thakur conducted an aerial survey of the landslide hit area, which is in Kinnaur district, and the Himachal Pradesh government will provide the kin of the deceased 4 lakh rupees each, and 1 lakh rupees each will be provided by the transport department. The critically injured are getting 50,000 rupees each for medical expenses. And those with minor injuries, those will be also borne by the state. Now, according to the state government, 15 people have been rescued and 15 are deceased, I beg your pardon, and 14 have been rescued. Here's our report.
Search and rescue operations continued on Thursday in Nigulsari area of Himachal Pradesh, where massive landslides took place on Wednesday due to sudden mountain burst. State Chief Minister Jairam Thakur conducted an aerial survey of incident site. He visited the spot by road and took stock of the relief and rescue operations. He also reached the Kinnaur Community Health Center and inquired about the injured being treated at the center. After meeting the family of the deceased, he announced an ex gratia of 4 lakh rupees as compensation to the families of deceased.
हमारी आईटीबीपी की टीम प्रमुख रूप से एनडीआरएफ की, डोगरा रेजिमेंट की, पुलिस की हमारी टीम, उन्हें रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन तुरंत शुरू किया और 13 लोगों को रेस्क्यू भी किया, जो बहुत कठिन कार्य था। 13 लोगों को रेस्क्यू किया गया और उसके बावजूद भी अभी तक जो सूचना हमको विभिन्न माध्यमों से वहाँ पर मिली, ड्राइवर कंडक्टर जो बस के थे, अभी तक भी ये देखने में आ रहा है शायद 16 लोग जो है वो अभी तक भी मिसिंग है।
Many passengers are fear trapped in the rubble. 300 personnel of ITBP and NDRF and police are engaged in rescue operations.
जैसे हम वापस आए अपनी गाड़ी के पास तो वहाँ भी पत्थर गिरना स्टार्ट हो गए। ये इतना मतलब जैसे गाड़ियों को बोला कि पीछे कर लो, बैक कर लो गाड़ियाँ, उतने को हमारे को नहीं लगा, ऐसा ही लगा ऊपर से कि पहाड़ गिर गया ऊपर हमारे।
ये मेरी बहू की बहन है।
अच्छा, नहीं मिल पाई थी?
उसका बच्चा भी नहीं मिला, डेड बॉडी नहीं मिला। अच्छा, बच्चा लड़का छोटा ससुर से मिलना चाहिए हमारे।
मुख्यमंत्री ने क्या बोला है?
मुख्यमंत्री कोशिश कर रहे बोला, हाँ मिलेगा बोला हुआ है। हाँ जी।
Expressing deep anguish over the incident, Union Minister Anurag Singh Thakur said that the relief agencies are engaged in relief and rescue work.
बहुत दुखद हादसा था किन्नौर में। केंद्र सरकार की ओर से भी माननीय प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी ने, गृह मंत्री अमित शाह जी ने हर संभव सहायता देने का प्रयास किया है और कल से ही एनडीआरएफ की टीम हो, आईटीबीपी की टीम हो, प्रदेश सरकार की टीम हो, सब ने हिमाचल प्रदेश को वहाँ पर राहत कार्यों में अपना जो योगदान दिया उससे भी लोगों की जान बचाई जा सकी।
Kinnor area of Himachal Pradesh on Wednesday witnessed massive landslides due to sudden mountain collapse, and the debris hit the moving vehicles including a truck, bus and cars. Bureau Report, DD India.
Forest fires, floods continue unabated as extreme weather events emerge as a disturbing trend in different parts of the world, from Italy to Tunisia and Turkey to North Korea. Nature's fury is sparing nobody. Here's an account of the damage done.
Extreme climate activities continue to ravage many parts of the world, be they wildfires in Italy and Tunisia because of scorching heat, or flash floods in North Turkey and North Korea. Talking first of Italy, fires stoked by hot winds swept across southern Italy on Thursday, a day after a monitoring station in Sicily reported temperatures of 48.8 degrees Celsius, which some scientists believe could be the highest in European history. Firemen said on Twitter that they had carried out more than 500 operations in Sicily and Calabria in the last 12 hours, employing 5 planes to try to douse the flames from above. They said the situation was now under control on the island of Sicily, while fires also raged in the southern part island of Sardinia.
Our small town was really invaded by fire. It is a catastrophe. The entire Californo Park and the surrounding area went up in flames. We have lived and are still living some really sad moments because the territory has suffered a very serious loss.
Along the Mediterranean coast of northwest Africa, wildfires burned in the mountainous parts of western Tunisia during a record heat spike across parts of the country. Eyewitness footage showed several large blazes raging in the forested areas of Jendouba, west of the capital, as fire trucks rushed down roads. In Tunis, temperatures reached a sweltering 49 degrees Celsius according to the Meteorological Institute. Heat waves in the Mediterranean region over the past week have contributed to wildfires that have swept through forested parts of Greece, Turkey and Tunisia's neighbor, Algeria. After battling wildfires in the south, flash floods in northern Turkey have killed at least 6 people. Apart from flash floods in Kastamonu, in Turkey's Black Sea region, there was also flooding in the Black Sea provinces of Bartın and Sinop. Rescue operations are on in the region. And finally, across the oceans in North Korea, flooding occurred in seaside towns as fresh rounds of heavy rain struck towns along the east coast. India too has experienced landslides, flash floods and cloudbursts in the recent times, an indicator that climate change is a clear and present danger. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, as the world battles to get back on track while continuing to do the inevitable to quell the coronavirus and its variants, countries around the world have been dealing with issues from oxygen demand to vaccination of all school staff, different responses to different levels of exposure and the ability to face or to control any surge in cases. It's now 20 months since COVID-19 first took the world by storm.
The situation has worsened in Kenya as demand of medical oxygen has gone up sharply. Companies are doubling production this year to keep up with surging demand from hospitals treating critically ill COVID-19 patients. The demand for the commodity has soared to 880 tons from 410 tons before the pandemic.
The capacity between all the companies that are in this country, if we had 2,000 such patients, we do not have enough capacity to take care of them.
US state of California has mandated its teachers and school staff to be vaccinated or regularly tested for COVID-19. California has become the first US state to take such decision in a bid to curb the spread of COVID-19 in schools. California's Governor Gavin Newsom has called it a responsible step to ensure the safety of children.
We've become the first state in the country to require that all of our staff, not just teachers, credentialed staff, paraeducators, custodial staff, the bus drivers, folks that are critical to supporting the entire school ecosystem, also submit a verification of vaccination.
COVID-19 crisis has further deepened in Cuba with the number of cases surging eightfolds. The country is bringing back hundreds of doctors working abroad and converting hotels into isolation centers and hospitals to battle the outbreak. The country facing the worst outbreak races to vaccinate its population against the disease. Cuba has over 4,83,000 cases of COVID-19 with more than 3,600 fatalities so far. Chile has begun administering booster shots of COVID-19 vaccine to those who have already been vaccinated against the disease with Sinovac vaccine. The country has taken the decision in a bid to lock in early success following one of the world's fastest mass vaccination drives. In Australia, lockdown rules were further tightened in 3 council areas of Sydney as they border the Canterbury-Bankstown council area, which currently has the highest number of COVID-19 cases in Sydney. Residents in these areas have had movement limited to within 5 kilometres of their homes and mask wearing made mandatory when outdoors. Australian authorities are taking utmost precautions to curb the surge of COVID-19 infection. New Zealand plans to allow quarantine-free entry to vaccinated travellers from low-risk countries from early next year. New Zealand announced the decision that is part of a phased reopening of its borders that were shut last year due to the pandemic. Chinese state media outlets have removed quotes by an alleged Swiss biologist carried widely in local and social media on the politicization of the COVID-19 origin probe after the Switzerland embassy in Beijing expressed its suspicion and termed it a fake news. Switzerland's foreign ministry said Wednesday that several Chinese newspaper websites have removed comments about the coronavirus pandemic that were wrongly presented as coming from a Swiss biologist who does not appear to exist. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei said on Wednesday that the COVID-19 pandemic was the country's #1 problem and must urgently be curbed and called for greater efforts to import and produce vaccines. Daily coronavirus cases have hit 42,000 in a 5th wave of infections in Iran, which has been hit worse by the disease than any other Middle East country. In the meanwhile, India has been supporting Bangladesh in making liquid medical oxygen available to meet the shortage of oxygen. The 7th Oxygen Express carrying 186 tons of oxygen arrived in Bangladesh on Wednesday night. The first Oxygen Express was sent to Bangladesh on July 24th to help the supply of oxygen for the treatment of COVID-19 patients in Bangladesh hospitals. Bureau Report, DD India.
News from back home in India. Well, the government and the opposition, they indulged in a war of words over who was responsible for the dismal output of the monsoon session of Parliament. Delegations from both the ruling party as well as the opposition met the Vice President on Thursday and presented their stand. They also addressed the media, and CCTV footage that emerged shows the unruly behavior of the opposition as they disrupted the entire session.
The monsoon session of the Parliament may have ended prematurely, but the battle over who is responsible for ruckus in both the houses still continues. Delegations from both the ruling party and the opposition met the Vice President on Thursday and presented their stand. After this meeting, 8 senior ministers of the Union government, including the Parliamentary Affairs Minister, attacked the opposition holding a press conference. They condemned the opposition's conduct in the House as shameful and sought an apology. The ministers said opposition's intention from day one was to not allow the Parliament to function.
उन्होंने क्या-क्या किया, उन पार्टी ने क्या किया, लोकसभा में, राज्यसभा में कैसे उनका व्यवहार था, ये सब देश देख रही है. I demand, if they have little sense of responsibility and democracy, they should apologize to the country.
ना जनता का हित, ना टैक्स पेयर के पैसे की फिक्र और ना ही संवैधानिक मूल्यों की गरिमा की फिक्र थी। और जो घटा वो बहुत शर्मसार था, निंदनीय था और एक घड़ियालू आंसू बहाने की बजाय इनको तो देश से माफी मांगनी चाहिए।
The Treasury bench maintained that the opposition not only did not allow the introduction of new ministers, but some MPs also snatched papers from the ministers' hands. The ministers alleged that the opposition leaders breached parliamentary decorum, even standing on benches, and one MP even threw the rule book on the chair. CCTV footage of the opposition's uproar, assault and misbehavior with the woman marshal in Rajya Sabha has been released by a news agency. Looking at these scenes, it seems that the opposition MPs have crossed all limits. The ministers demanded that the Rajya Sabha chairman take strict action against those responsible. They also termed opposition's allegations of manhandling as false.
4 तारीख को 6 members were named and they tried to forcibly open the door by breaking the glass. शीशा तोड़ के अंदर आने का कोशिश किया। एक महिला कर्मचारी को घायल हो गए and she has given in writing that मुझे ऐसी घटना में घायल हो गए, एक्शन होना चाहिए।
9 तारीख को जो भद्दा प्रदर्शन उन्होंने टेबल पे नाच के और एक तो इतना बड़ा रूल बुक मोटा चेयर के ऊपर फेंका गया कि अगर उस समय चेयर पे कोई बैठा होता या सेक्रेटरी जनरल नीचे बैठे थे उनको लगता तो घायल ही नहीं होते। बहुत बुरी तरीके से कातलाना हमला किया गया चेयर और सेक्रेटरी जनरल पे
कि एक महिला मार्शल के साथ जो केवल अपनी ड्यूटी करने आई है, जो ड्यूटी के लिए संसद में उपस्थित है, पहली बात तो उसके लिए वेल में क्यों गए और दूसरी बात उसके साथ इस प्रकार का व्यवहार क्यों किया? क्या किसी भी सांसद को यह आचरण शोभा देता है?
Earlier on Thursday morning, several opposition leaders marched from the parliament towards Vijay Chowk over the repeal of 3 agricultural laws and for not being allowed to speak in the parliament. Later, they also met the vice president. BJP has described the behavior of opposition parties as an embarrassment to the country and democracy.
सभी लीडर्स, उपराष्ट्रपति जी को, जो हमारे राज्यसभा के चेयरमैन हैं, उनसे मिले और उनको हमने एक मेमोरेंडम पेश किया जो सदन में घटनाएं घटी उसके बारे में उनको सविस्तार से बताया।
जिस प्रकार का व्यवहार आज कांग्रेस पार्टी और कुछ और ऑपोजिशन पार्टी सड़क पर उतरकर कर रही हैं, एक बात तो स्पष्ट है, सदन के अंदर जिस प्रकार संसद को सड़क बनाने की चेष्टा की गई, जिस प्रकार अराजकता संसद के अंदर इन ऑपोजिशन पार्टीज ने और खास करके राहुल गांधी जी के नेतृत्व में कांग्रेस पार्टी ने दिखाया है, पूरा देश शर्मसार हुआ है।
Due to the uproar in the parliament by the opposition, not much discussion could be carried out this monsoon session. However, the government managed to complete some legislative work amidst the uproar. The Rajya Sabha even witnessed some violence in the House on Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, a Congress MP climbed a table and threw files on the seat. There was also misbehavior with a female marshal. The manner in which the dignity of the temple of democracy has been eroded by the conduct of the opposition is indeed very shameful. With Shailendra Mishra, Bureau Report, DD India.
And Vice President and Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, M. Venkaiah Naidu, in a meeting with the Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla, reviewed the unfortunate sequence of events in Parliament during the recent session. They expressed deep concern at the disruptive behaviour of some parliamentarians, and they strongly felt that such unruly behaviour should not be tolerated and appropriate action should be taken. Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with women's self-help groups and lauded their services during the corona times. The Prime Minister said that the government is creating an atmosphere where all sisters can connect their villages with prosperity. Let's look at this report.
When Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in Atmanirbhar Nari Shakti Se Samvad and interacted with women self-help group members under the Deen Dayal Antoday Yojana National Rural Livelihoods Mission, he showed keen interest as they shared their experiences. He lauded self-help groups of women for their unprecedented services during the Corona period.
कोरोना काल में जिस प्रकार से हमारी बहनों ने स्वयं सहायता समूहों के माध्यम से देशवासियों की सेवा की, वो अभूतपूर्व है। मास्क और सैनिटाइजर बनाना हो, जरूरतमंदों तक खाना पहुंचाना हो, जागरूकता का काम हो, हर प्रकार से आपके सखी समूहों का योगदान अतुलनीय रहा है।
Prime Minister released a compendium of success stories of women SHG members from all across the country, along with a handbook on universalization of farm livelihoods. The Prime Minister also released capitalization support funds to the tune of rupees 1,625 crore to over 4 lakh SHGs. In addition, he released rupees 25 crore as seed money for 7,500 SHG members under the Prime Minister Formalization of Micro Food Processing Enterprises scheme of the Ministry of Food Processing Industries, and rupees 4.13 crore as funds to 75 farmer producer organizations being promoted under the mission. The Prime Minister said this is the time of 75 years of independence. It is time to set new goals and move forward with new energy. The government is constantly creating an environment so that women can connect our villages with prosperity and well-being.
महिलाओं में उद्यमशीलता का दायरा बढ़ाने के लिए आत्मनिर्भर भारत के संकल्प में अधिक भागीदारी के लिए आज बड़ी आर्थिक मदद जारी की गई है। फूड प्रोसेसिंग से जुड़े उद्यम हो, महिला किसान उत्पादक संघ हो या फिर दूसरे सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप, बहनों के ऐसे लाखों समूहों के लिए 1600 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक राशि भेजी गई है। पिछले 6-7 सालों के दौरान स्वयं सहायता समूहों में 3 गुना से अधिक बढ़ोतरी हुई है। 3 गुना अधिक बहनों की भागीदारी सुनिश्चित हुई है।
Prime Minister said that in today's transforming India, opportunities are opening up for the sisters and daughters of the country to move forward. Facilities like a roof over their heads, toilets, electricity, water and gas connections are reaching their doorsteps. The Prime Minister urged self-help groups to join the campaign to make the country free from single-use plastic. He asked them to raise awareness about single-use plastic and work towards finding alternatives.
भारत में बने खिलौनों को भी सरकार बहुत प्रोत्साहित कर रही है। इसके लिए हर संभव मदद भी दे रही है। विशेष रूप से हमारे आदिवासी क्षेत्रों की बहनें तो पारंपरिक रूप से इससे जुड़ी है। इसमें भी सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप के लिए बहुत संभावनाएं हैं।
The Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihoods Mission aims at mobilizing rural poor households into self-help groups in a phased manner and provide them long-term support to diversify their livelihoods, improve their incomes and quality of life. Bureau Report, DD India.
The total installed renewable energy capacity of India, excluding large hydro, has crossed the milestone of 100 gigawatts. Today, India stands at the 4th position in the world in terms of installed RE capacity. That's 5th in solar and 4th in wind in terms of installed capacity. India has set an ambitious target for itself in the area of renewable energy, and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is committed to achieve this target. While 100 gigawatt has been installed, 50 gigawatt is under installation and 27 gigawatt is under tendering. India has also enhanced its ambition to install 450 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030. If large hydro is included, the installed RE capacity increases to 146 gigawatt. The achievement of installed RE capacity of 100 gigawatt is almost, it's an important milestone, in fact, in India's journey towards its target of 450 gigawatt by 2030. The Minister of Power and New and Renewable Energy, R.K. Singh, informed that India achieved another landmark in the history of the Indian power sector. He said renewable energy capacity, excluding large hydro, has crossed 100,000 megawatts under the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He vows to continue to be global leaders in energy transition. To mark International Youth Day today, Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur conferred the National Youth Awards for 2017-18 and 2018-19 to 22 awardees at the Vigyan Bhavan in New Delhi. And it said that youth are the future. Anurag Thakur said that youth are the present of India as well. And he urged youngsters to play a crucial role in creating social change through innovation, to achieve sustainable development. Here's a report by Tapas Bhattacharya.
With the objective to motivate the youth to achieve excellence in the field of national development and social service, as well as to inculcate in them a sense of responsibility towards the community, the National Youth Awards were conferred on Thursday by the Union Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports, Anurag Singh Thakur. Commemorating the International Youth Day 2021, 10 young and successful entrepreneur teams of the Agri Enterprise Challenge were also felicitated. During this occasion, the Union Minister Anurag Singh Thakur said that youth are the largest stakeholders and hope of the nation, which will play a huge role in nation building.
There are 4 A's: high aspirations, the right aptitude, a resilient attitude, and that will determine the altitude you reach in life. This is true for each one of us, whether a citizen or a minister. In fact, 4 A's can help us accelerate and achieve Prime Minister Modi's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat.
The Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, in collaboration with the United Nations Volunteers and United Nations Development Programme, had launched the Social Objectives-led Volunteer Enterprise Development, or SALT, Challenge in December 2020. Over 850 youth had applied from across India, and after many rounds of contests and training. Anurag Singh Thakur said that youth act as a catalyst of peace and prosperity globally and can bring positive changes in all sections of society.
We have a crucial role in creating social change through innovation and also achieve sustainable development. And when we talk about the sustainable development, globally we have fixed the roles and targets for the SDGs. And I request you to pick one area, one theme, where you really want to bring change in your lifetime.
The award comprises of a medal, a certificate and a cash prize of 1 lakh rupees to individual and a cash prize of 3 lakh rupees to organizations respectively. Tapas Bhattacharya's report, DD India.
The Indian Space Research Organization today launched its Earth observation satellite GSAT-1, but the satellite was launched at 5:43 in the morning on board the GSLV F-10 rocket from Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota, Andhra Pradesh. ISRO said that the performance of the first and second stages was normal. However, the cryogenic upper stage ignition did not happen due to a technical anomaly. The ISRO chairman, K. Sivan, said that the mission couldn't be accomplished as intended.
The GSLV F-10 UIS-3 mission could not be fully accomplished, mainly because there is a technical anomaly observed in cryogenic stage.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address the Investor Summit in Gujarat tomorrow via a video conference. The summit is being organized to invite investment for setting up vehicle scrapping infrastructure under the Voluntary Vehicle Fleet Modernization Program or the Vehicle Scrapping Policy. Now, it will draw focus, in fact, on synergies presented by the ship-breaking industry at Alang for the development of the integrated scrapping hub. The summit is being organized by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways and the Government of Gujarat, and it will be held in Gandhinagar. It will see the participation of potential investors, industry experts, concerned central and state government ministries as well. The Road Transport and Highways Ministry and the Chief Minister of Gujarat will be present on the occasion. The vehicle scrapping policy is aimed at creating an ecosystem for phasing out unfit and polluting vehicles in an environment-friendly and in a safe manner. The policy intends to create scrapping infrastructure in the form of automated testing stations and registered vehicle scrapping facilities across the country. And well, the Investor Summit is being held in Gandhinagar, Gujarat on the 13th of August to attract investment for the setting up of the vehicle scrapping infrastructure. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi will inaugurate that summit virtually. But talking to DD News, the Transport Secretary Giridhar Aramane said that the vehicle scrapping policy will ensure employment generation and will boost the automobile sector.
How important is this event that's being held in Gandhinagar in Gujarat, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be the chief guest and will be inaugurating it, as far as the vehicle scrappage infrastructure is concerned?
It's a much awaited policy. It was formulated under the vision of Honorable Prime Minister to make the entire economy a sustainable one. Our commitment to the Paris Convention to reduce the pollution and to make entire climate goals the common man's program has resulted in this policy. This is a multifaceted policy. This offers benefits to the vehicle owners in a major way. This impacts the automobile sector in a major way. And in general, entire society will benefit due to reduced number of accidents as well as the reduced pollution in cities. That way, this policy has been in the making for quite some time. It has been the demand of both the common man as well as the industry for almost a decade or more. Now, under the guidance of our Honorable Prime Minister, the policy has reached the final stage, and we want to apprise the investors the benefits it will bring to the economy and motivate them and promote them to invest in the new facilities to be set up for the scrappage as well as for the automated fitness testing.
When we talk about the job creation or employment opportunities, when we talk about this entire vehicle scrappage ecosystem, what sort of employment opportunities are we witnessing or expecting?
The employment created in the automobile sector also will go up in a major fashion. All in all, in next few years, we hope that the number of people who will get employment in this sector will be around 35,000, and it can be more as we progress. And people see the advantages of buying a car with new features. We'll have better employment opportunities in the country.
And in conclusion, news snippets from across the country. Here's our national roundup.
Over 600 villages in Uttar Pradesh are reeling under floods. 22 districts in Uttar Pradesh continue to face heavy rain, with major rivers like Ganga and Yamuna flowing over the danger mark in many areas. In other state of Bihar, flood situation continued to be grim in 12 riverine districts including Patna, Buxar, Bhojpur and Munger. The situation has further aggravated following continuous rise of water level of river Ganga. Chief Minister Nitish Kumar has asked district magistrates of 12 districts to remain alert and step up relief and rescue operations. In Jammu Kashmir, terrorists attacked a BSF convoy in Kulgam. The attack took place in Mir Bazar area when the BSF convoy was passing from Jammu to Srinagar. In retaliation, the security forces also opened fire. Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandaviya on Thursday held a meeting with WHO Chief Scientist Dr. Soumya Swaminathan. They discussed the WHO's approval of Bharat Biotech's Covaxin. Dr. Soumya Swaminathan praised India's efforts in the fight against COVID-19. A simple prayer function of elephants was organized in Kodagu, Karnataka on the occasion of World Elephant Day. Forest Department distributed ration kits to mahouts. The purpose of this day is to raise awareness about the issue threatening elephants. Union government has released a population estimation protocol to be adopted in the exercise to be taken up for the All India Elephant and Tiger Population Estimation in 2022. Military band displayed in front of grand steps of Vidhan Sauda in Bengaluru on the occasion of 75th Independence Day and as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav.
And that's all we have in News Night tonight. Thank you very much for being with us. Namaskar.